This is Peter,
And this is Tom,
and you're listening to History Teachers Talking Podcast.
now part of the Evergreen Podcast Network.
All right, this is Peter Zablocki and Thomas Rescott, and welcome back to our podcast. Tommy, what do we got?
Well, today we're going to look at, we're getting a little into like relics again, right? Artifacts. And we're looking at one that's supposed to grant the user, some powers. And it's presented through multiple like battles throughout history. A lot of great leaders supposedly held this, and it was fought over and pursued. So we're going to take a look back a little bit about the Spear of Destiny and how faith is really what made it important. And because people believed in it, it had power. Whether that's mystical power or not, that's something that you can decide for yourselves. But people believed it had power, and that's why they wanted it.
Yeah, and I mean, talk about believe in power. This was in DC Comics, right? This has been
Well, it's
in
in
multiple movies.
there's movies, yeah. But actually there are physical examples of the Spear of Destiny. Again, whether or not it's a real one, that's a total, or it's the one. We'll get into what it was and what it's supposed to be. But people believe no, this was a real thing, physical object that we have. Well, there's several of them out there right now, and that they can give the power abilities and stuff like that.
Yeah, to be precise, the holder of the spear is believed to have the power to control the destiny of the world. However, there's one fatal caveat to that once the holder ceases to own the control of the spear of destiny, he will soon there or she will soon thereafter die. Again, myth of it all, but let's kind of get into this idea of what is the spear of destiny. Then we'll kind of get into Nazis and all this, because that's kind of why it becomes popular in our pop culture, is because
Yeah,
supposedly Hitler was obsessed with it, which is why that's kind of how, when you start looking at it in popular culture, that's really what it's concentrated on. But we'll really go back and talk about like the origins of the supposed Holy Lance, because that's also what it's known
yeah.
as.
The
And
Holy Lance, the Holy Spear, Spear of Destiny, right? Lance of Longinus.
yep. So Tom, in most basic principle, right? Like, what is it? Just quick one sentence, and then I'll get into some background.
Basically, it is the spear that the Roman Longinus
Yep.
used to pierce the side of Jesus as he hung on the cross.
Yep. Right. Yep. In the most basic principle. That's kind of what it is. This is not a Christian podcast in any way, shape, or
No,
form.
no, no. We're not preaching religion
Yep.
or that this is what it was, but this is how the legend starts.
Exactly. So just kind of real quick, I want to touch upon the idea of a person of Jesus, the historical figure of Jesus, not the Christian figure of Jesus. Billions of people believe that Jesus of Nazareth is one of the most important figures in world history, primarily because of the start of Christianity. However, a recent survey conducted by the Church of England actually believes that, saw rather, that 22% of adults in England do not believe that Jesus was a real person. When you start looking at the historiography on Jesus of Nazareth, you start to realize that there was really, it's undisputed, you might say, that this person actually did really exist. Whether you believe, Christianity and what he stood for symbolism wise, there was really no discrepancy in saying that this was a real person. Now,
Yeah, he was real. Whether a son of God, that's a whole different thing. But a physical being of Jesus of Nazareth, yeah, that was a real person at least.
yep. There's no archaeological evidence that he existed, but also we don't really have any archaeological records or evidence for virtually anyone that lived in Jesus' time, right? Especially since he was considered at the time by the Romans as kind of unimportant, like, almost like a peasant in a sense. So there wouldn't have even been any real archaeological evidence. However, he is mentioned initially. That's kind of where it gets interesting, because the documentary evidence of him really starts with the New Testament. And obviously, people will say that's biased because that's a Christian gospel that talks about his existence. But it's quickly corroborated also by Flavius Josephus, who was the first non biblical Jewish historian. And he first wrote about Jesus existing as a person in 93 AD. It was a massive 20-volume history of the Jewish people. Also, shortly thereafter, you have Roman historians, also in about 96 AD, writing about Jesus' existence. It's not just the Christian Bible that talks about his existence. It is corroborated, and all this information fits in like puzzles, that this person was seen as a troublemaker, was seen as someone that was enticing the people against Roman rule, and for that he was crucified. And that's kind of where we get into a story of the Holy Lance, right? So why is he stabbed anyway? Once he's crucified, Tom?
That's just what they that's what they did in crucifixion, right? Like it
Yep.
was just a way to speed the process up,
Yep.
more or less. Also very painful, obviously. It would pierce the sides, and then that would bleed out while you're being suspended there. Because remember, I know that becomes like a symbol of Christianity, Jesus on the cross, but that was a very common practice
Way to go. Yeah.
of punishment, of death, during that time. This is what the
Hmm.
Romans did. They crucified people. They literally were nailed to a cross, and then you were left up there to die for others to,
Yeah.
bleed out, essentially.
Yeah, and they said that they would eventually, after if you didn't die quick enough, they would break your legs when you were up there. So what essentially happened here is
It
while
was brutal.
Jesus is on the cross, the Romans sent guards to kind of make sure, basically to break his legs to just make sure that he's dead, and to hasten to death. And then they realized that Jesus was already dead, and just to be sure, you have this one particular guard whose name is was it Longinus? Longinus, right?
Yeah, Longinus.
He takes a spear and allegedly he pierces the side of Jesus as he hangs on a cross just to make sure that Jesus is dead. Now, this is where you get some myth really kind of comes into play right away because what happens to a Longinus?
Well, some of the blood spews out and
Yep,
it gets in his face, particularly on his eyes. And he was apparently had bad eyes. He was blind, or cataracts, I guess you could say. And the
yep,
blood from Jesus heals it instantly.
yep,
So he heals his eyes. So right away now he becomes a believer. He's actually, like you said, I know we were talking about this before. He later becomes a saint, and he Saint Longinus, and he's actually crucified himself because he starts preaching about what happened.
yeah, in Christianity, yep,
So basically, him doing this, okay, it makes him a believer, and that's really, I guess, sets the groundwork for the spear and what it can do, because of what Longinus said. So it's also known as the spear of Longinus in a lot of circles, and yeah, so that's what his part says. It has these healing powers, these powers that whoever wields it will have great power, not just physical power, but the power to control their own destiny. That's also why it's known as the spear of destiny.
yep. Let's kind of go into supposedly what winds up happening to this spear, right? Because as you mentioned earlier, we think we have the spear,
Well,
but
there's a lot of it, right? So
yeah,
you got to remember that one reason why this is so, in Christianity in general, they like relics. Okay, Christianity, like they have like the relics of the saints. Jesus left no relics,
yep,
so that's why anything that's associated with him is a big deal, like this spear. And there's not one spear of destiny, or there's not one clear cut spear of destiny. Let's say so. There's at least three disputed relics of the Holy Lance.
yep,
Okay, so the Vatican doesn't claim that any of them are authentic. All right, but there are actually three of them, and there's some history behind why there's three. Because there were copies made that we know of. The spear broke at one point. At least that's what people talk about. So that's why there's more than one basically out there, right?
yep. Yeah, and I guess we'll start by discussing the Roman one, and then we'll go to the one in Vienna, right? Like
Yeah.
how it's transferred over, and there's also one in Poland, but we know for a fact that is a replica. The main one initially supposedly kind of comes into play in 615 Jerusalem, right?
Mm-hmm.
615 Jerusalem is captured by the Persian forces, and according to the history of it, it was during this capture of Jerusalem that the lance itself is found. Therefore, it is brought out of Jerusalem. However, it is also broken off at this point, right? And the tip of the actual lance is,
Breaks. Yeah. Snaps
yeah,
off.
yep, snaps off. It is brought to Constantinople and it is hidden in a church, the Church of the Virgin and the Pharaohs. That's that just the point of the lance. And from this point, like we don't really sure what happens to the rest of it. That's we'll get back to that in a second. Eventually, what ends up happening is this tip of the lance is acquired by the Latin Emperor of Constantinople, Baldwin II, who later supposedly sells this tip of the lance right to Louis the Ninth of
The Knights
France.
of France. Yeah, and that was because he knew the importance of that to the rulers of Western Europe. Basically, he knew he could get a lot of money for it, get some prestige for it, right? So
Yeah, because there's already a belief at this time.
yeah,
People that possess this. This is 600s, right? If you possess this land, you will be, which is also kind of crazy. Like if you own it, right? I mean, you kind of have to be cocky. If you're the emperor of Constantinople and you're like, I don't need this land. It's like, even though everyone believes that it gives someone so much power, it's like I'm just going to sell it to France. So it does. It gets sold to France, and it kind of disappears for a little bit, right? The larger
well,
portion.
because of the French Revolution, yeah, they believe that they took all the relics and hid them somewhere.
Yep. And then you have the larger portion of the lance, like the remainder of it.
Yeah.
Supposedly is still left in Jerusalem, and it's seen around 670 in Jerusalem. But after that, after Jerusalem falls, it kind of never really is talked about. Some believe that it was also brought over to Constantinople in about 8th century, together with another relic, which is the crown of the thorns, which we still also don't know if that's the crown of the thorns that was placed
Yeah,
on.
there's that. There's several nails that I think, I guess we'll talk about that, wind up getting added to one of the spears, right? Did you see that? And they
Yeah,
said they
that's
were the
kind of the key. That's what makes it legit in
they
any way, shape, or
they
form,
were
right?
they were the nails from the crucifixion that were obviously added to the spear. So this it's not the spear gets changed over time also.
Yep. Comes out again in 1357. The blade of Holy Lance is seen. This is interesting. It's seen both in Paris and in Constantinople. So now it's like, wait a second. Like, did Constantinople like keep it, or did they actually sell it to France 100 years prior? Because there is now the discrepancy of there being two of these spearheads. Am I good so
Y
far?
Yeah, that's what I was finding too. Yeah, so they were basically and it base there's I was reading a lot that was all written by someone named, Sir John, Mandeville, that he
Yep.
saw it, and a lot of historians go back and say he's not exactly the most, trustworthy source,
Yep.
most trustworthy witness, but he was doing a lot of travels during his time, and he says that he saw the lance that, pierced our Lord's side. But then there's some other people that also talk about seeing it, and we see it mentioned in some other texts around 1430s, right? So that's when they
Mhm.
think, all right, it had to be in this general area. Because again, it is a physical object. This isn't like being made up as far as like, oh, it's out there and we have to find it. No, there are physical objects that are being presented as the spear, this lance.
Yep. So this is kind of where you have a little bit of an explanation why there might be two, because the Constantinople the relic, the one that's one, remember, there's one in Paris and there's one in Constantinople, and the one in Constantinople falls into the hands of the Turks in 1492, and then once that happens, the Sultan, the Turkish Sultan, sends this tip of the spear to the Pope, right?
Yeah,
And
Pope
Innocent the Eighth.
Innocent
Um,
VIII, yeah.
and he's saying this mainly because he's like, look, you could have this spear of destiny because you're keeping my rival brother a prisoner, and I don't want him to come back and try to take over from me. So at this time, so this is how the spear of destiny makes it to Rome. At this point, we know that there's a rival one in Paris. So what winds up happening is the Pope, actually in mid 18th century, Pope Benedict the 14th, gets from Paris the exact drawing and dimensions of the point of the lance that Paris has, that was supposedly sold back in hundreds of years prior, and he compares it with the other relic that he has in St. Peter's Cathedral, and he realizes that actually it
It's
is there's two pieces of a puzzle, right?
yeah, he says it would
One
form one
blade.
blade. Yeah.
Right. So therefore, it's not two different blades. It was always one blade, and the one that was in Constantinople that is now in Rome is just half of the tip, while the other one is the other half. That's the one that is in Paris. And then this relic never leaves Rome, right?
It's still there, right?
Yeah, it
Still in
stays
St.
at St.
Peter's.
Peter's. Yep. All right. So now, what's going on with the Holy Lance in Vienna? What's going on there?
So that's displayed at the Imperial Treasury, right in the treasure room at the Hofburg Palace in Vienna, Austria.
Yep.
And this is the it's added has like the typical wing lance, right, of that dynasty of Charlemagne and all those other things. So at
Hmm.
different times, it was said to be different lances from Constantine the Great in the 10th century. The Holy Emperors came into possession of the lance, according to talks from Otto the First
Hmm.
and some of the other people of the time. Apparently, Henry VI also had a silver band inscribed with the nail of our Lord added to it. This is when they add a lot of
This is
other
the key
stuff
one.
to
Yeah,
it.
this is like the
Yeah.
modified lance.
So they added stuff to it, basically to make it even more of a holy relic, right? We're adding the nails from the crucifixion to it also.
This makes me think, though, Tom. Think about it. It's possible that the Vienna one actually never was the real Spear of Destiny. It's like they made the Spear of Destiny from a real nail that was
Yeah,
used
from
to
other. Well,
crucify.
we also know, and we'll get into it, that a lot of copies of the Spear of Destiny were supposedly made and given as gifts to people.
Yep.
So some of those, and that's one of the other ones that are out there. They believe is actually a copy of the original Spear of Destiny that was given as kind of a gift.
Yeah. But I think the credibility of this Vienna one lays in the fact that it has a nail of our Lord added to it.
Yeah,
Like that's what
that's
gives
what also
credibility.
gives it because it's still that metal, and it was drenched in the water and the blood of Christ supposedly. So
Yep.
that also what gives it some of that credibility.
Yep.
So it's there. It was used in this coronation ceremony, right? It was for a lot of emperors like Charles the Fourth he put a golden sleeve over the silver one. So it's
Mhm.
again, there's a lot of things added to it over time. These collections of relics were just really really important at the time.
When you start looking at it, they say that the so many historical figures have possessed this, this one. Constantine the Great possessed one, obviously from the other one supposedly. Then you have Charlemagne, Otto the Great, the Pope. It's like all of these super known people and powerful people in history have possessed a version of this. Whether it was the other one that was broken in two between France and Rome, or this Vienna one, which may have been made after from the nail of the Lord, right? French Revolutionary Army approaches, right, in 1796, Vienna, and that's where it's kind of hidden for safekeeping.
Yeah, they hide it. Yeah, well, Baron von Hugel, right? He was one part put in charge of protecting these, and he promised to return all the objects once the threat was resolved.
Yeah,
That was
because
his plan.
Napoleon really wanted this. He just couldn't find it.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
kept on
Oh,
hiding it from him.
he would have definitely have brought that into battle. Because remember, this supposedly the spear was used during a lot of the Crusades. Also, we
Yep,
kind of skipped that part, but I'm not going to get into every battle, but it was like passed around all these battles, and whoever wielded it
won the battle.
won the battle essentially. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, so imagine Napoleon was like, "Yeah, give me that
Oh, he would
spear."
have definitely just the showmanship of it. He would have definitely just said, "Look what I have,"
Yeah,
and
haha.
yeah, definitely use that in the battle without a doubt. There's no doubt about that.
However, he doesn't get it.
No,
So yeah, the city. So anyway, so it's hidden. The Holy Roman Empire is disbanded. That's kind of was hiding in 1806, and the collection itself, were with everything else, because there's a bunch of other things that were part of it, that were also important culturally to Vienna. Is sold to the Habsburgs, and then the city councils asked for the collection to be returned after the fall of Napoleon, and the Austrian authorities kind of refused. What ultimately happens is it is eventually brought back to Vienna and put on display, and this is
and
where we get
who sees it? Who sees it in Vienna?
right
I'm just
Hitler. So this is where
yeah. So
Hitler gets really excited.
Hitler sees it, and this is what's going to start all that occult stuff that goes back. But he actually sees it there, and he writes about it right in Mein Kampf.
Yeah,
Right,
he sees it in 1912, so he's really
yeah,
young when he first
yeah,
lays his eyes on
hmm
it.
and he just becomes infatuated with it. With it.
Yep. And this is where we get this is kind of, it's like the UFOs and whatnot, but you have this idea that there's actually books written about this. I'm not sure if we could put much stock into them, that Hitler really started the war just to get his hands of the spear of destiny.
Yeah, I think
And
that's a little bit give a little
I
bit
think that's a
hyperbole
stretch.
there, but that's just a stretch. Yeah, but he
Yeah,
did.
stretch.
He was interested in it. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, but also there's so much discrepancy in this, because when I was researching this, they said that he really just took over Austria just so he could get to the museum and get the Spear of Destiny. And
Yeah, I think that's a bit of a stretch too.
right, that's another one. And then,
He had other reasons why he wanted Austria to be part of
of
Germany. Like,
course, plus the fact that kind of
but it fits the
historically,
narrative, right? It makes a good story. So
right?
that's one reason why it's out there. Yeah.
And also supposedly supposedly when the first thing he did, when, because you see videos of him, riding through this motorcade when he invades Austria, and what a lot of these historians, quasi historians, saying is that you don't really see the videos of him going right to the museum and getting the Spear of Destiny.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Because Hitler too was a showman. He would have, if he would have went and got it, he would be marching around with it.
yeah,
He would be showing it off to people, and we would have like footage of that. Again, like conspiracy people would believe like, well, no, all that stuff was like hidden away, lost to history. But I don't know.
yeah, I don't know if I would.
They had it, but it wasn't like I don't think that was his sole motivation for everything.
Yeah, and yeah, I don't. Well, they definitely had it. That's yeah. Let's not that happened, right? But I don't think he invaded a nation to get this Spear of Destiny. What essentially happens? Well, there's another thing also. You probably saw this too, right? They said that after, because it was hidden, which we'll get into in a second, but they're saying that the second it was discovered and taken by the Allies, that within like hours, that is when Hitler took his life. But they said even minutes, within 90 minutes after the U.S.
Yeah,
forces.
I saw a lot of that too, but I don't know if that how
Yeah, actually no,
accurate.
because it was found. We found it much after Hitler had already
It was
committed
actually in
suicide.
August when we found it. He killed
Yeah.
himself in April.
Yeah, so that's
So
totally, again, but there's like books about this, which gets, well, again, people can make up history. We live in a different world.
yeah,
Um, but anyway, so the Nazis are supposedly obsessed with this. He hides it, right? The SS winds up hiding this
yeah,
because obviously they don't want this to
a
fall into
bunker.
anybody else's hands. It was a bunker, right?
Yeah, it was put in a bunker underneath Nuremberg Castle
Yep.
to protect it from like air raids. That's what I believe it was, and then they eventually most of it was recovered after. Well, actually, Patton is the one that's actually kind of made like a special investigator to find a lot of these things after the war. He was
Yep.
tracking down a lot of these things. So
Well, the Walter Horn, he was a medieval studies scholar, and he wound up actually fleeing Nazi Germany as Hitler was coming into power. And it is this man, this Walter Horn, that serves under Third Army under Georges Patton, and he becomes, as you said, like this special investigator for monuments, fine arts, and archives program at the end of the war. And he is tasked with finding not necessarily just the Spear of Destiny. I mean, he's really tasked with finding all artifacts, but also fine art and anything else that the Nazis took. Because, I mean, some of these men in the Monuments, Fine Arts, and Archives program, which probably could be a podcast in itself, are portrayed and honored in the Monuments Men book and the subsequent movie. Monuments Men, actually, one of the Monuments Men lived in my town for the longest time. He has since passed away, but he used to go to the local diner. We used to see him there all the time, which is, I forgot which actor played him in the movie, but um, he came and spoke to our school a couple times. Really
that's
awesome,
cool.
awesome story. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Um,
good. Get that firsthand experience stuff.
yeah. Plus, it was like 400. It was 400 of them, the service members that worked with the military to basically safeguard any historical cultural monuments from the war damage. Like that was their job.
It was important to preserve that stuff, without a doubt.
Yeah, and that's also how we come about having the Allies own the lance itself.
Yeah, the Vienna one, yes, the
The
Vienna
Vienna,
one.
well, the
But I
Vienna
mean,
one at least, the
you
one
got
with
to
the
you got to remember.
nail, the one with the nail.
Yeah, and that nail becomes interesting. I'm sure you saw this too. That
Yep.
eventually a museum actually in 2003, so fairly recently, gets permission to examine the lance. I actually
Yeah, they
remember
took it
seeing this.
apart. They took the
They
lance
took it
apart.
apart. They did X-rays. They were allowed to remove the main parts of the spear. So they basically were able to determine that the main body of the spear dated back around the 7th century.
Yep. So
And then that,
clearly not Jesus.
yeah, and then the iron pin. This is what that came to be a nail from the crucifixion hammered into the blade. The first test said it was consistent in the length and the shape of a first-century AD Roman nail, right? But there was
Yep.
no human blood or anything on the lance. But also, after thousands of years, things could happen. A couple of years later, they researched it again, and then they X-rayed again by a different lab, and they say that all of it dates back to around the 7th, 8th, or 9th century at the best. That they said even the nail is probably not from the 1st century AD.
Yeah, and this is the interesting part because it's
But
like,
so there's conflicting views there.
yep.
But again, there's more than one lance that's called this. People are always going to have doubts no matter what.
But don't you feel like it's interesting that I mean they had unprecedented permission for this lance, right, in
To do this,
2003
yeah.
to do this, and the I mean we're talking X-ray, fluorescence tests, non-invasive procedures, all kinds of stuff. And they did say that all right, the nail's probably 1st century, the lance itself is not. But then all of a sudden you have a whole another archaeological company that uses other technology, and they're like, nah, it's all fake. It kind of adds to this,
It adds to the
this
lore. It adds to
lore, right?
because until there's so many of these relics or things out there. Even when we talked about the ones about Indiana Jones, right? We did all
Yep.
those podcasts on that one, right? Nice plug for an earlier
Yeah.
podcast that we
Go
did.
listen to
But
that one.
there's people are going to believe it one way or another. People are not, and that's really. But like I said before, that's the fact that people do believe it. That's what makes it relevant anyway. The fact that it is being talked about. That we'll get to a few minutes. We'll talk about some of the other ones. We'll talk about how this thing is used in pop culture, like crazy. When I was researching this, I'm sure you too, Pete. There's a bunch of apparently I didn't even know this. It's like video games called the Spear of Destiny.
Yeah, I did not know that. But I
Right?
mean, it's
All
funny
these-
because Constantine. Remember Constantine?
yes.
Like that was a good movie back in the day, 2005. And then like I thought back, I was like, oh yeah, Spear of Destiny.
Well, that's
Uh,
in that Hellboy in the comics. They talk
Yep.
about that and everything. So, and it's a big thing used in Marvel and DC comics. Even to this day, they still talk about it. Like when I was researching, I was actually found something. Oh, this is a good thing. It's giving like all this information
I
about
found
it.
that too. Like DC fandom, right? Was
Yeah,
talking about
but
it.
then and then it's like, oh my, okay, the Nazis had it. Then Captain America, because
Like
how it's presented, it looks like a real page, and and it's like, so it's again, it's doing the
you're like,
research.
wait, what am I reading?
Yeah, it's like Captain America saves it. Like what? So it's because
Which
it's appeared so much in the comics, and it's part of like the mainstream comic history. Because even
yeah,
dating back to the 40s when these comics came out, they had the Spear of Destiny.
yep. So
So
anyway,
it's just, it becomes
message
a big
here,
thing.
guys. Message here is don't believe everything you read on the internet.
Yes, make sure you check your sources, because I was like, because it looked like a real like historical page, and it wasn't even like
Boom,
it
and then
just was.
Captain America
Yeah,
came.
I was like, yeah, would make for a good story. Would make for a good story.
That's
All right,
awesome.
so let's talk about the. So that's the Vienna spear,
Yep.
right? How about
Those are
the one?
those are the two main legit ones, or three main legit ones that we
Yeah,
discussed.
yeah.
But there's more.
Well, you have the I'm not gonna be able to pronounce this. The
Armenia. There's Armenia. Holy Land's.
well, it's not the one I was talking about, but okay.
Oh, which one are we gonna talk about?
Well, I think we counted that one already. The one at Vag Hirsch.
Yeah, Vagar Shapat.
Yeah, in Armenia. In Armenia.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we didn't
Okay.
talk about that one, did we?
Okay. No, no. But that one they think is probably a replica, right?
Yep.
It's
Yep. Yep.
probably a
Yep.
replica, and it's still there. You can see it. So according to the text, the spear pierced Jesus' side, like we talked about, and it doesn't specify like where it was kept, but the Holy Lance gives a description of exactly it matches a lance, and I think it's
Yep.
at the gate, right? It's at like the
Yep.
gate when you walk in. It's right there.
And they say that this one was probably made around like 13th century,
Yeah, this
because
is
that's
one of
when it's first mentioned.
those copies of it.
Yeah. In 1655, French traveler officially writes about it that he saw this relic in Armenia. But this one looks nothing like the other ones. If you guys like
Very different. Yeah,
look
this
into it,
almost looks like a key.
yeah, it looks like a key, and it's not gilded. It's got no gold. It's got nothing on it. It makes me think of like when you think of it going back to Indiana Jones at the end when
Yeah,
he's like
the
searching for
Holy
the Holy
Grail.
Grail. It's like
Yeah,
the
that.
plainest one.
Well, it was probably the one that if it's going to be a spear, like it is a spear. Like that's it. Like it's just very
It makes you think,
basic.
right? It's not like they had golden spears.
No,
Like,
no, no. Longinus
yeah,
was not doing it. Yeah, they add all this other stuff to it.
yeah,
And then there's the one that you actually saw, right? That's in Krakow, Poland.
yeah. It is. Yep, that one's like really gold.
Yeah.
That one's kind of sin there. It was a gift. It was a copy, and it was a gift that was given to the Polish king in 13th century. It's at the Wawel Cathedral in Poland. It's still there. I was there this past summer. This one looks like really fancy. Like you could tell it was a gift to a king. Like let's make this one gold and pretty, so you have the power. It's more like symbolic of like I'm giving you the power. But yeah, that's pretty much that. So what else are the only ones? I mean, obviously you could probably buy one on eBay, but
Well, yeah. Well, I'm sure a replica or something, or something, something like it.
all right. So, what else? Do you have another? I mean, there's another one. Wasn't there another one that was found supposedly in the
In
Antioch?
Antioch, yeah,
Yep.
yeah. By the monk Peter Bartholomew reported that he had a vision, which Saint Andrew told him where it was buried. So he actually they dug up the church, and they dug up underneath the church, and that's where they supposedly found the Holy Lance of Antioch, right? And they think it probably dates back to when the Crusaders like broke the siege of it and secured the city. That could be one, but a lot of them argue that this could be their true Holy Lance too. Again, it's one of those things you're not really going to be able to prove. They believe
Yeah.
it was probably around the 10th century though.
Crazy.
So
And again, the power. It has we don't. There's a lot of stuff we don't know, but apparently, like when possessed with care, right, and it was carried by many kings and emperors, right, to
well, they
glorious
had
victory
yeah.
in
I
battles.
mean, again, it doesn't matter what people believed it. So
Yep.
I know I keep on saying that, but
They say that Attila the Hun was forced into retreat because Theodoric had it with him. And then in possession, you start looking at it. Longinus obviously was killed afterwards because of it. So it's almost like the idea of like once you get rid of it, you die. Charlemagne carried the spear through 47
yeah,
successful battles. They
yeah. But
said,
then he dropped it. But how do you accidentally drop that?
"Yeah, I
Like
don't know,
if it's making you win, I would
yeah,
like I don't know, duct tape it to your arm or
slow
something. Like
motion,
make
no."
sure you don't lose it. You know, but
And then Frederick Barbarossa, right, Holy Roman Emperor, died. This is again, we don't know this, but the theory is that he dies within minutes after he accidentally drops it into a stream on one fateful river crossing. Like, imagine that. It's like, I will win this battle. Oh no! Like, that's what? I don't know. I don't know. And then obviously is the thing about Hitler um dying shortly after the spear is recovered by the Allied troops, which we know for a fact is not happening coincidentally at the same time. Like this happened months later, which kind of takes away from the credibility of the other stories of Holy Roman Emperor dropping it in a stream and then dying minutes later. Again, crazy.
so what do you think, Pete? Would you like when you went to go see it? Would you tempted to like do a smash and grab or no?
Yeah, seriously, run for it.
See if you could get it, and just run out and see what would happen, and then,
I was like, I'm bringing this back, bringing this back.
take things over. No, wasn't
Yeah,
like calling
no,
to
it
you.
didn't really do it for me. No, there's
No.
didn't do it. Nonetheless, so the Holy Lance, guys, the Spear of Destiny. I'm sure if you are into comic books or if you watch movies, I'm sure Hollywood is not done with this Spear of
No, I'm
Destiny.
sure it'll be in other things because it's a story that they can always put some sort of spin to,
Yeah,
right? And what it's going to be. But yeah, there, like I said, there's novels, there's movies, There's TV shows that use it as a main plot. I'm sure there'll be other ones coming up. And there's other ones too. This is not the only relic of Christ. Obviously, there's the Shroud of Turin is probably another one of the most famous. Like the Holy Grail. Like these are the other things that are these relics, because there's no physical relics of them. So they have these other things, which, it doesn't matter if they're true. What doesn't matter if they're true or not. It's just the fact that people believe in them. That's what gives them their power.
Anyway, that was an entertaining one. So
different, yeah.
Different. We try to aim for the different, sometimes.
Once in a while, yeah.
Yeah.
We'll switch it up.
Well, anyway, thank you guys so much for tuning in once more to listen to our podcast. We really do appreciate it. If you guys need to find us, you can find us at www.historyteacherstalkingpodcast.com. Please make sure you guys click that subscribe button wherever you listen to this podcast, and please leave us a review. We do appreciate those. So thank you so much, guys, and we'll see you next week.
Stay safe, everybody.
I hope everyone enjoyed our podcast, and if you would like to email us, you can do so at historyteacherspodcast@gmail.com.